That day we were eating a steak and Bobby drops his knife and his fork and he says, the Holy Ghost just told me, Andrew, you need to come pray for my son right now. And I was looking at my steak and I was like, I want to finish this first. And he said, now.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's Mike from Louisiana, and yes, this is a video that I am so excited to show you. Pastor Andrew Kennedy from South Africa, he's been to the United States. This was his 65th trip across the pond to come and preach and teach in the United States. And I was able to sit down with him and shoot some video and get some of his amazing stories of the healings and miracles that God has done in his ministry and in his father's ministry. He sat down with me and allowed me to video a few of these things, and so I'm going to be putting these out here in the next few months. So please subscribe and follow along so you can catch them when they come out. Hit the little notification bell as well. If you'd like to contact Andrew, I'm going to put his information down below. You should follow him on Facebook. A young man named Caleb Gallaway, his back was broken and God did a miracle in his life. And so Andrew's gonna tell us that story about that day and what happened. Sit back, relax, and follow along this great miracle that God did.
Caleb Gallaway rocked my world. And on this trip, I had the privilege of going to see him after 20 years. To really tell the audience and you guys what happened there, you know. So I'm going to really take my time and tell the story.
That's good.
So I've got this friend in Alexandria, Louisiana, Dr. David Remedios, that ended up organizing meetings for me. And one of the stops that we did was in Leesville, Louisiana. And on our way from Alexandria to Leesville, it's probably like an hour, 20 minutes drive. I, back in the day, put a CD into the CD player of his car of a friend of mine that really, you know, moves in powerful praise and worship. And Dr. David Remedios, I always mock with him and say he's so light on spiritual electricity, you know. So he gets so drunk in the spirit. And we have to stop to just let him walk it off, you know. Well, that ends up into me getting late for that service for 45 minutes. And Pastor E.J. Danton, who was the pastor at that time, you know, he meets me this way. He goes, he receives me, he says, "You're late, let's go." And I felt so embarrassed, you know, because it wasn't my fault, it was David's fault. So I'm preaching that night, and those first 10 minutes was absolutely horrible, it was tough. And the second half of that service, EJ starts getting behind me, you know, and he amens and pushes the service, and we had a good service. And he walks up to me and he says, "Now, where are you tomorrow night?" And I said, "Oh, no, nowhere." And he looks at the audience and he says, "If I let Andrew preach tomorrow, will you guys come back?" Okay, well, that started off 2 weeks of services every night.
Wow.
Because the following happened. The next night, Caleb Gallaway's mom and dad, who pastors down the street, Bobby and Julia Gallaway, they came with some of their church folk to attend the meetings. And that night after service, they received the call that Caleb, who was studying in Bible school in Houston, the young guys were running down a hill and he tripped and he fell, and this big old boy fell on him and snapped his back. Wow. That's how he broke his back. Ah. So of course, you know, mom is upset, dad is upset, and the next day, they missed the next night's service because they had to organize how they're going to get Caleb from Houston back. Very painful ride. They drove him back because what happens with a broken back, they're going to put you in a body cast and give you pain medicine and tell you to keep it extremely slow, bedridden for a couple of weeks. Your back needs to grow up together, and then doctors will take you from there with physio. So he's back in Leesville, Louisiana. Me and EJ and Pastor Bobby Gallaway eats a steak. Because that day we were eating a steak and Bobby drops his knife and his fork and he says, the Holy Ghost just told me, Andrew, you need to come pray for my son right now. And I was looking at my steak and I was like, I want to finish this first. And he said, now. So we left the restaurant, we went over to their house and Caleb was lying in his bed. And if I tell you that miracle rocked my world, it's because back in the day, I had my little list of how God can work. I had to be prayed in. I had to at least fast a meal. I had to have like super faith after being prayed in, and then I'll go for the miraculous.
That's good.
Well, that day, I'm not prayed in. I'm definitely not fasted. I had faith for like, let's say, a headache. Not a broken back, man. Okay, so I pray, and we anoint Caleb with oil. So get the picture, guys. This is the bed. Caleb's lying in the bed. I'm kneeling at this side of the bed. His mom's kneeling on that side of the bed, and his dad kneels at the end of the bed. And Julia just has a meltdown, and she goes, Andrew Kennedy, you need to tell me why my son is in bed with a broken back. He's not a bad boy. He's not out there partying and on drugs and doing what some other kids are doing. And in fact, the devil robbed him today of testifying of how great our God is. That God would save my son from a car wreck that should have killed him. And she says, in fact, Andrew, look at that photo album right there on that cupboard next to the bed. And you can see the pictures of how Caleb walked away from that wreck. And as true as you are sitting right there, Mike, and I'm looking to you guys listening to this podcast, God closes my eyes that I cannot see that photo album. And I'm trying to look. I see there's a couple of magazines lying there, but I cannot see the photo album. I'm looking for a photo album. And there's this moment where Julia, who's on the other side of the bed, is too far to reach out and give me the photo album. And Bobby is just, there's not enough time for him to walk around and take the photo album because Caleb forgot his back is broken, leaps out of bed, leans over, takes the photo album, and gives me the photo album.
Wow.
That's how we found out, hey dude, that's supposed to hurt. And the moment we all wanted to say that, he says, oh my, this doesn't hurt. Jumps on that bed, touches his toes 2 times and screams, I am healed, runs out of the room, down the stairs, around his house, and comes back. Okay.
Wow.
That freaked me out. I ran outside of that house that day and just stood and cried. And I called my father. I said, Dad, something just happened to you in America. That's just, I don't know how to explain it. And that's the day that I met the sovereignty of God. It's years later that I can now speak about it and understand what happened there. This thing is really all about God. God just looks for a vessel to minister through. And I think back in the day, our hearts were precious and our motives were pure. To be prayed in, to be fasted in, and none of those things are wrong. And to have like super faith. But God, at the end of the day, doesn't need that to do what He wants to do. He just needs obedience. He just needs you to drop your knife and your fork right there. Don't finish that steak and go pray for Caleb.
Yeah. Obedience
is better than sacrifice. And I learned that day that it's really by God's grace that these things take place, And you just be a vessel for God to flow through. So I encourage you guys, lay your hands on the sick. Trust God for the supernatural. If your business is struggling, trust God to supernaturally intervene and listen to the Holy Ghost. This doctor who I think brought in and said, Doc, you need to really come and help me with this. So when David looked at those x-rays and he looked at Caleb, he just started crying. And then he started telling us of how he operates and follows the voice, that still voice of the Holy Ghost, that sometimes says, now I know the book says that you need to do this in this operation, but I'm telling you, if you do this woman will die. He's got testimonies of that. And how he followed the voice of the Holy Ghost. So yeah, that's the Caleb Gallaway story. And I got to, after 20 years, go see Caleb. We revisited the x-rays. You guys can go and see it on my Facebook page. And we got pictures of us looking at those x-rays and where his back was broken and how God healed him. Wow. Okay, so here's the testimonies after all of that happened. The kid that broke his back, that messed him up forever. coming to find out that a year ago he called Caleb. He said, man, I need to hook up with you. He says, I have so lost my way because that day it feels to me like I robbed you of your destiny. He goes, and I am so far away from God. In fact, I'm an atheist. And he says, I'm out just doing what I want to do. He says, and I would be okay if it wasn't for what happened to you after I broke your back. I've got no information, as wise as what I think, to explain that. And Caleb said, get in your car, let's go have lunch.
Wow.
And that miracle saved an atheist's life.
Wow.
And he's a believer again.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah. And when I met Caleb now, after 20 years, he took me back to that restaurant. That restaurant is still there. And I finally finished my steak.
Hey, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like the video and subscribe, I would mean the world to me. Leave a comment down below for Pastor Andrew and let him know what you think about this tremendous miracle. If you want any of his details, they are down below in the description. And stay tuned, because I've got many more videos coming out with Pastor Andrew on this channel. Thanks for watching.